Or just out of curiosity, how many of you are taking June? A couple of Junes. All Junes, awesome. How many of you might also be taking July? All right, so we still have a few. And then what about September, the fall?
Hoping not to.
Hoping not to, of course. Hoping not to. But okay, so we got a few people taking July, a few maybe taking September. So the digital LSAT is possibly in your future. In June, of course, it's not. But the only thing that is digital about June is the writing sample, which you'll do at home, not at the test center. But if you've ever done a writing sample previously, if you've taken the LSAT before, you don't have to do it again. But July, half of the students get digital, half get paper. It's assigned to you, and you don't get advance notice. So you could get digital in July, and then of course September, you definitely will get digital. Now, LSAC has published 3 prep tests on their website, familiar.lsac.org, exams 71, 73, and 74. And they will be adding more over the next several months. They've implied, I think, at least a half dozen additional ones, so there will be a lot. This is currently just a familiarization tool. It's not something where like you can score yourself and it'll automatically give you your results at the end, but it's a way to get familiar with the format of the digital LSAT. All the little tools and annotation tools they have on there are available to you. They're constantly updating it. They only added 73 and they only added 71 and 74 like 2 weeks ago, I think. So it's constantly changing. They recently also added the ability to reveal your answer along with each question. So you could be doing question 5 and just click and a little drop down will give you the correct answer, credit your response right there. I would not look at that in the moment because you're not going to be able to do that on test day, of course. Get used to not getting immediate feedback on your answers. Get used to not knowing until the end of the entire exam what it's going to be like. But that this tool is the best thing you could use to practice. A lot of prep companies are also making LSATs in the digital format, so you'll be able, if you're getting exams from a prep company, going forward they won't be giving you PDFs only. Most likely they'll be giving you some interactivity as well. And the digital LSAT, of course, I should mention, is going to be on a tablet, specifically Microsoft Surface Go, but any other tablet will function well with it as well, most likely. And so there's really, I can talk about it all I want, but there's really no substitution for actually seeing what it looks like. So again, familiar.lsac.org will let you see the tool and walk through it all. One thing I should mention for the tablet is that it's a 10-inch Microsoft Surface Go specifically. They initially did a pilot run with a 7-inch Samsung, but they dismissed that in favor of the Microsoft one. And you can either lay it flat on your desk, or you can prop it up with a kickstand up to almost 90 degrees. And I think all else being equal, you might want to prop it up because desks are often small. If you prop it up, you'll have more surface area on your desk, and you can have your scratch paper next to you. You'll get a booklet of about 14 pages of paper. That's kind of like similar to the newsprint you get on like the old paper LSAT. It'll be like a newsprint style 14-page booklet. And that's probably enough scratch paper for almost anybody, I think. I think it's quite a lot compared to what you used to have, which was just the empty space on the page around the questions. This is a lot more. It's not unlimited though, so don't go crazy writing really big or writing things without putting enough thought into what you're putting down. But that is a good amount of scratch paper. And if you have your tablet propped up at an angle, you can put your scratch paper right below it and then kind of act as if it's a continuation of the screen. So you can't draw freehand on the tablet the way you can on a book, but if you could use your scratch next to the tablet, then it'll almost be like you're turning an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper into a legal size piece of paper where you have the questions at top and then your diagrams below it on the paper that's to the side directly below it. So I think that's one strategy you might want to consider using. Like I said earlier, if you don't have a tablet, I think it is worth getting one because you can get an Amazon Fire for only $150 and then return it if you want to. And that's a good way to at least get some practice, or if not that, then at least borrow a tablet from somebody for at least a few run-throughs. In the meantime, yeah, question?
If, like, I already own a tablet, but do you think it's worth it to buy, like, the pen, or do you think just, like, using my finger is fine? Like, does it make that much of a difference, like, for practice?
That's a great question. First off, I'll say a stylus, you can get a stylus for probably, like, $10.
Yeah.
So I think just the cost alone makes it worth getting because $10 is nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But personally, I kind of like the finger better overall. It's so much faster. They are touchscreen enabled, so why not use your finger? If you're holding a pen or pencil, to just use your finger versus like picking out something else or flipping it around. What they'll give you at the test is a device that is a stylus on one end and a pen on the other. So if you wanted to use it as a stylus, you'll be flipping it over. So you could play around with it, see what you like best.
But you can still like use your finger.
You could still use exactly.
Okay.
You can still use your finger as well. And that's my personal preference, but up to you. I would certainly try it out though with the stylus. The tools that you get on the digital LSAT, like I said, you can highlight in 3 colors. I think it's pink, orange, and yellow. And you can underline as well. And basically you click to choose what you want to do. So like you click to underline, and then underlining will be enabled throughout the rest of that section until you switch it off or until you switch to something else.
You can't underline highlighted stuff. You can't highlight underline.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Exactly. So you cannot do both on the same text. So for any given text, you are either underlining it or highlighting it. You can't highlight in multiple colors. You can't combine orange and pink to create some new color. And you can't highlight and underline something at the same time. So you're picking one annotation tool at a time and focusing on it. There's also an erasing function, which is nice, of course. You can remove what you've highlighted. You can remove what you've underlined. So that is, of course, different from a paper LSAT where if you underline and you erase it, you can't really fully ever erase anything 100%. Same for underline. You can't highlight, you can't ever unhighlight something on paper. These tools are interesting. I don't think they have an enormous benefit to you, though. If you wanted to play around with different strategies, you could, like I said earlier, highlight viewpoint 1 in one color, viewpoint 2 in a different color for reading comprehension, for example. One cool idea I've seen is to take the highlighter and use it not to highlight text, but to separate text. So if you had evidence, 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 as like, these are like 3 words all relating to evidence, then you have conclusion words. You could put a highlight right here if there's like a period there or something, or a comma there. Maybe you could highlight that, and that would form as a separation between the two, because one of my biggest gripes with the digital is that not being able to draw freehand is that you cannot bracket things. I used to love to bracket, like if this was like evidence and this was conclusion, I would bracket, okay, this is evidence, marking with an E, this is conclusion, marking with a C. You can't do that on the digital format anymore. You can't draw on it with a pencil or a pen like you could on paper. So you've got to treat all your LSAT prep test books now, if you're taking digital, like they're a screen where you can only interact with your books in this way. So you've highlighted, you cannot unhighlight. You can unhighlight on the book, but you can't really, I suppose. So I guess what I should say ultimately is you can't draw freehand on your books anymore. That's the biggest change you want to make. And on your books, of course, you can't truly simulate this fully because you can't erase on a book like you can on digital, but get used to keeping it separate and get used to not bracketing anymore if you used to bracket previously. I guess the other thing you could do also is you can highlight or underline not only the stimulus, like for LR, but also the answer choices too. So you could maybe highlight a contender answer choices as one particular color consistently to keep it under further consideration. When you flag on the digital LSAT, you'll have basically a little navigation bar at the bottom, and these will be like your bubbles, and it'll show you when you bubble something. If you bubble it up here, it'll bubble down there, and if you flag up here, it'll flag down there. So you can flag questions to come back to later, and you'll see at a glance all the questions you flagged to return to. It won't tell you what answer you've given. So if you've given like A bunch of times, you won't know at a glance how you've given, what you've chosen, to see if there are patterns in, like you've done tons of A's, so time to try something else. You won't have that on digital. You'll only see that you've bubbled it in or not, but you'll see at a glance if you flagged it. But what I was going for is that if you want to mark off your answer choices on digital, what you could do, let's say you have A, B, C, D, E. Let's say that you want to take B as a contender. you could underline it or highlight it in some way to set it apart. You eliminate C, you'll click over here, there'll be a little slash, C with a slash, you could slash it out, and then it'll automatically kind of get a bit more faint instead. So you'll be paying less attention to that. And then of course you can consider whatever remains as well. Another thing is that sometimes the text on digital is beyond what will fit on the screen. So in those cases, you'll have to scroll up and down a little bit. So you have to get used to not seeing everything at once. But you can collapse answer choices with like this sort of function. There's like a little up arrow, and if you click that, it'll collapse all that text to make it smaller. So if you have a long reading comprehension answer choice or a long logical reasoning answer choice, you'll be able to remove that and get it out of the running as if you had eliminated it as well, so you can focus more on the other choices that remain. Other things you can do, you can make the text size larger, you can make it smaller. I think that those are more meant for those with sight issues. So you can make it really large, but then you'll have to scroll more as the downside. So I prefer to keep it the normal size, or maybe smaller if it won't all fit on one screen, so that you can see everything at a glance. You can also increase or decrease the brightness as well of the tablet. So this won't work on the desktop version, but it will on the tablet or mobile versions. You can also invert the colors along a grayscale. So you can change if you want it to be like black and white instead of white and black, you can do that too. Kind of interesting. One thing I should mention is glare. So tablets and smartphones, we all know that there's glare. Sometimes you have like fluorescent overhead lighting that can create glare on a screen. That has happened quite a bit with these tablets. And so if you're taking digital, the first thing you want to do when you walk in is look at your tablet and look at how the overhead lighting is affecting your screen, because it's possible that you may want to sit somewhere else. During the pilots, they were reseating a lot of people around the room based on how the lighting affected the tablet. And of course, LSAC over in Pennsylvania is not checking out all the test centers to see what it's like for this. And so be ready for that, but address it early before the test actually starts. Like I said earlier, there is no break between sections. They really are back to back to back instantly. The second 35 minutes hits at section 1. The countdown immediately starts for section 2, going down 35 minutes, of course, 53 if you have accommodations. But either way, it starts immediately. And even on the directions screen, there's a directions screen before you actually hit the questions. And the timer is going while you're looking at the directions. So don't take that as like a free time to rest or to read the directions. Obviously, you should know the directions beforehand, right? The second that screen hits, you want to just click onto the questions and jump immediately to number 1. But don't be fallen into a false sense of security. Don't be lulled into false security because it's a reset. They intend for it to be back to back. They intend for it to be difficult pacing and difficult endurance, and so they want to keep you moving on that.
Like when you take it on paper and like they call time, like maybe that last one that like you didn't get to, you can kind of bubble it in like as they're transitioning, but like. And you have like maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I will say yes, you did on the paper. You do typically have something like 10 seconds, maybe even 20 seconds, while they kind of reorient their timing for section 2. But I do want to caution people not to continue bubbling after they call time. Like maybe in some cases people get away with it, but it's against the rules, and people do get called out for it. They do get citations on their records. I have heard personal stories of this happening from people where even the proctor thought they were still bubbling when they weren't, and it was a whole to-do. But you do want to be careful of that. On the digital, that's the interesting thing on digital is that there's no room for ambiguity with timing or with the proctors. The 5-minute warning will always be given unless there is a glitch in the software. But presumably the timing will happen, 5-minute warning. It'll actually be a big pop up on the screen, like a pop-up ad blocking your view of the questions. And it won't go away until you click it, because they want you to know 5 minutes has hit. Of course, it sucks if it kind of interrupts what you're doing, but I suppose so would a verbal warning of 5 minutes on the paper version, but be ready for that to pop up. And of course, look to play around with the digital format on LSAC site to see what it looks like. Because the other thing is, of course, that there won't be any lost booklets. It actually has happened that in several administrations of the LSAT, they lose the booklets and they blame FedEx, which is, I guess, fair, but I guess don't use FedEx if this keeps happening. But digital, of course, everything's I assume, over the internet, and they'll be able to transmit it smoothly, and no arguments over timing. It is official, it is defined. I do think that the bubbling will save time. Like I said earlier, 2 minutes maybe per section for bubbling. If you're fully bubbling in every circle, maybe 1 minute, but now with clicking or tapping your finger, it takes no time at all, really. One thing I want to say about how to practice that I haven't mentioned yet is that there is one of the biggest annoyances I have personally with the digital is that you can only see one question at a time no matter what. Like we're used to seeing in our books, the 2-page spread for games, 2-page spread for reading comp, 2 LR pages at a time. On digital, it is only one question at a time no matter what section you're dealing with. You don't get that kind of bird's eye view. All you get is this in terms of a bird's eye view. And they do separate it where, like, if this was game 1, they have a vertical line, then continuing game 2, and then of course 9 and 10, vertical line. They do let you see at a glance where the separations are, but they're not letting you see all 5 of these at once. So if you prefer to do things out of order, like I do sometimes, you do have to click around. If you do want to see what's coming next, you do have to click forward on that, which is a little bit annoying, but something to get used to. It could maybe help you on LR to focus on what you're dealing with, but for the others, I think it is a little bit of something to get used to, and all you can do really is practice. It is simply clicking ahead on the forward arrows to see what's coming next, and you can go back. You can also click here. So if you're at number 10, you can click number 4 and it'll go immediately back to number 4, which is kind of nice. It is instantaneous, maybe even faster than flipping. But if you do want to get a general sense of what's going on for a passage or a game, you do have to kind of click around and then remember. So keep that in mind. One thing I would suggest is actually to maybe make a cutout on a piece of paper that's the size of one LSAT question. So maybe just like take a pair of scissors, just cut into your page, cut out a hole, like a rectangular hole that is the size of one LSAT question, and overlay it on top of your book if you want to get used to seeing what only one question at a time looks like. It is something to get used to. So just food for thought there. The biggest thing, honestly, is getting used to scratch paper, getting used to one question at a time, not writing on your questions themselves. And then deciding how, if at all, you want to use those highlighting and underlining tools. Experiment. I think it's worth experimentation and see what you like, what you don't like. And if you can get the PDFs, then of course that makes it pretty easy to at least get used to doing work separately from and having questions on a screen.
It'll be easier for skipping. Make sure you don't forget anything. You can see on the bottom.
Yeah, you won't miss bubble either. Yeah. There's no chance of misbubbling like having a Scantron on the side.
Having the ability to like eliminate answer choices so they'll get grayed out is like really nice.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps your focus on what you do want to look at versus what you don't.
But I don't know, something about like working on paper is much different than being able to concentrate better.
Yeah, I like it too, but I guess we'll all get used to it with time. One other thing I should say, I suppose, is that with reading comp, if you want to look at the passage with the questions, you have to have part of the passage cut off and scroll down. You can't see the entire passage and a question at the same time. They have an option to view passage only or passage plus one question, but you can't see entire passage and one question at the same time. You have to get used to scrolling up and down a little bit. There's also no line references, so you can, in the paper version, of course, they have like line 15, line 20, line 25, every 5 lines they give you a number. On the digital, they do not give you line references on the passage, and then of course, because they're not in the passage, they're not in the questions. So they will no longer say, as in lines 39 to 40, blah, blah, blah. They don't have that anymore.
No more question types.
They do have the question type, but they won't reference any lines anymore because the line numbers would vary based on the text size. So if somebody enlarged the text or shrank the text, the line numbers would change because of how it's displayed on the screen. It's kind of interactive, right?
But I feel like I remember them having like, I don't know, I just looked at it for like a little bit, but like they have the thing in quotes and then you can like click on it and it will like move the passage to where that reference is.
What they do is they have it highlighted on the question stem, and they will also have it highlighted in the passage.
Right, yeah.
But you can't click instantly like that. But
it, like it highlights when you're on that question.
Exactly. So if let's say number 17 was a line reference question, they'll have the key term X is used how in the following in the passage. They'll have key term highlighted in the question stem and the passage. So when you scroll back to the passage, you'll be able to find it quickly. But no more line numberings. And you'll see even for, I believe, these reading comps, 71, 73, 74 that are on the digital LSAT site, you'll see they've removed the line references in order to better familiarize you with the digital format.
Does it come up highlighted on the trial?
The whole point of their new website is to help you get familiar with all the digital tools, and so they will have all of that built in as well. The only thing is that some of the functionalities do not exist on desktop, only on a tablet. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.